Hello, my name is Bob Williams. I'm a director of Horizon 8 and our affiliate company in Sigma Hung Tien Software Limited. Our company is a joint venture of State Street and Zhejiang University in Hangzhou, China, and the university's commercial affiliate in Sigma Technology Limited. Over the years, we've developed a strong personal and professional relationship with Paddy Keating. And Paddy has worked for organizations for whom we have done work led by Paddy, and we've developed a strong sense of confidence in Paddy's experience and wisdom in the area of technology and in collaborating with resources like ours. So we thought you might enjoy an opportunity to chat with us, with Paddy, and share some of his experiences. And we hope that you enjoy this podcast, and we thank you for joining us. Joining me today, Paddy Keating, who is a long-term friend and client of Hung Tien, and also Wells Shi, who is a senior manager at Hung Tien and is responsible for a significant portion of our global client work. Paddy, could I first welcome you and tell you what a pleasure it is to have you join us in this conversation? And this is a conversation as opposed to an interview. But would you help start us out by just explaining who you are and what your background is, particularly in terms of technology and and what you have done and what you're doing?
Sure, yeah. And one thing I mentioned, or I would like to say, is I don't really like talking about myself, but, I'll try and I'll keep it short. I graduated in computer science in a technical college in Ireland, near my hometown of Waterford. Um, my first job was in Japan. I worked there for 2 years in the research center, working with a community of researchers from Japan, China, Korea, US, Germany. Um, an interesting experience. And probably when I look back, that actually helped me think about how we work with a community of project team at different levels, from senior researchers like to lab assistants. It was, very interesting for me. When I look back at it now, it was important. I moved back to Dublin. I worked with IBM and KPMG as a software engineer, and I progressed into a software architecture role, working with customers in Dublin and in the UK. While I was working in Dublin, I met some friends, colleagues who had an interest in building something modern. In the industry, in life and pensions industry, basically it was mainframes, client server technology at best, infrastructure that was based on TCP/IP protocols. Technology was starting to evolve. Microsoft was on the scene. We thought to ourselves, well, why don't we build something, a modern solution for an old problem, an industry challenge? And that's when we started our company, Procana. That's where it came out of. We built a life and pensions platform, and over the years that progressed into providing business process outsourcing to insurance companies across Europe. And that's largely my background. That was where I spent 16, 17 years as CTO and director of solution architecture. So we started from company of 5, and we built it up into a company at the time when it was acquired, a few hundred resources, maybe 350 to 400 staff. So an interesting experience. And I guess that's where we met, or I first encountered Heng Chen. We were a company that, as we were growing, we needed to build out or scale up our engineering capacity, and engineering, testing, analysis, solution architecture. So we had some large projects coming down the line, and we needed a partner or partners to help us do that. We traveled, myself and a colleague traveled to China, and we met some of the team, and we were really impressed with what we found. And that relationship has been solid. up to this day. And I suppose the reason why I'm very happy to have this conversation is because, from the very start, we found it to be a very good relationship, one where, success was part of or a key component of the objectives on both sides. And building a relationship and building trust were key to that. So that's where we first met, and we've been in touch ever since.
So, Patty, it's interesting that we've learned a lot from you in the course of our multi-year relationship and multiple projects and multiple technologies that we've jointly worked on. But you have always seemed to us to be particularly good at designing and executing good project management, right? Your deployment of people, not just internal resources, but internal and external, and having those different disparate groups work effectively together to create a cohesive outcome, predictable outcome. You've always seemed to be particularly good at that. What techniques over the years have you found that makes that possible to bring multiple resources together to create a successful outcome?
One thing I have always done, I've always been involved in sports, and I have a keen interest. And probably what's very interesting about that is what makes certain teams successful versus other ones. When a manager looks after let's say a soccer team or an NFL team or a baseball team or a basketball team, what's the ingredient that makes a team successful beyond just the resources that the manager has? And that's what I've always been curious about. And really what it comes down to is that those threads of, I suppose, the culture within a team, the kind of aspects of respect and trust within a team. So what I've always believed, and I've probably believed it from the outset, is without those aspects or those ingredients of trust, collaboration, respect, you pretty much can't be successful. You can solve most problems if you have trust and respect and collaboration. Let's say you just have good infrastructure. Well, you can only solve an infrastructure problem with good infrastructure, but you can solve all problems, most problems, if you have those ingredients. And that's what I've set out to do. And where projects have been successful, those ingredients have been stronger. And where some projects have been less successful, there was an absence of either trust or engagement or collaboration. So that's really, how I've worked, and I've tried to build that within teams.
Well, it seems to me that over time, one of the key lessons I think we've learned from you and the project we've worked together with you on is how that trust, that personal relationship piece works. I've always been interested in my own life at the subject of what constitutes good leadership, and it's always struck me that optimism and humility are two of the key elements in that. Optimism because how else, without optimism, do you build a team? Without it, how do you establish performance goals? You have always seemed to be a person who is focused in an optimistic but still strict way, if I could call it that, on developing project milestones and project outcomes. That's been a learning exercise for us. Have you found that this style of management has sometimes held you back or held projects back, or is it just a standard that you have applied because it always works?
I suppose I would translate optimism into something else. I look at it, if you can establish that way of working to, let's say, the partner or the culture of the partner that you're working with, if you know what I mean. So it's kind of an openness, and that openness allows you to understand, well, what are the problems that we may have? What are the hurdles we have to overcome? And when you're kind of open and working in that collaborative fashion, that I don't know if it's optimism, but you're open to uh, challenge, and I talked about that, challenge in a positive way. So let's say you have an idea and you think, okay, this is a great idea. So Paddy's come up with a fantastic idea. He thinks it's great. But then somebody challenges and say, well, actually, it's actually just an okay idea. We can improve on that. That kind of level of that ability to collaborate and challenge in a positive way and be open about that, so that so on both sides of a relationship, you can say, actually, I'm open to you telling me that I'm wrong. And I'm open to you telling me, actually, I have a better idea. And you know, okay, that's a better idea. So one thing I've learned through the years is that you're not the only person that can come up with a good idea. Generally, good ideas become good ideas when you collaborate with other people, and that challenge, that positive challenge, makes a good idea sometimes into a great idea. And if you take that at the kind of relationship level, it works through processes, it works through contract negotiations, it works through resourcing, it works through challenges in terms of delivery dates. So that kind of openness, if you want to call it optimism, yeah, it's something that it's a working model. Because if you take the other approach, which is looking at it from a negative point of view and a risk mitigation point of view, and you're only seeing the negatives, you kind of miss that open, transparent kind of making a good idea into a better idea. You tend to narrow down your perspective into just something I was asked to do, and that's all I've done. And success is kind of delivery of the minimum. So if you have an optimistic, open view, you tend to deliver more.
In the world that you have been working in and you're working in now, how important are new technologies, such as, for example, AI? And how are you looking at those new technologies and integrating them into day-to-day development work?
Yeah, yeah. I would say super important. The AI technologies, the generative AI, large language models, they have accelerated in terms of their capabilities in the last 2 or 3 years. And even like there's been a large jump forward in maybe the last even 3 to 6 months. So every company is interested in the use of AI and how it can be used. I'm working on a program to see how AI technologies can be used to enhance customer communications, customer and broker communications. And it's, every company has interactions with customers, whether it's by email or by phone call or by post. Enhancing those interactions is something that you can use AI technologies to do. And enhancing can mean some degree of automation. It can mean making them better. But to a large degree, it's actually understanding what's happening in those interactions. Being able to dig deeper into, let's say, sentiment analysis. So when you're talking to a customer, was that customer happy when you started talking to them, or were they upset, or were they maybe concerned about something? And by the end of the conversation or interaction, are they in a better place? Using AI technologies, you can actually determine, using sentiment analysis, how that has progressed over time. So you're able to get insights into those interactions that you wouldn't necessarily have with ordinary systems. You can actually pass that information to an AI model and say, how has this progressed over time? And you can, based on how you use AI, you can actually get some really good insights from that. So AI technologies allow us to automate, but it allows us to dig deeper into the data that we have and derive metrics or operating reports that are very interesting to the business. And that type of insight can help a business determine, well, we should maybe develop our products in a particular way, change our processes, or change how we interact with customers. So AI is really important to many companies, and depending on your operating model, it can help you reduce costs, but I'm looking at it from the point of view of enhancing interactions, and that's really key as well.
So how have you found the process of integrating a new technology like AI into an overall systems development architecture in terms of internal decision making and
Yeah.
project design?
It's an interesting question because what you tend to find, or what companies may find, is that, okay, we have new modern tools, the use of AI models, generative AI, but they have their heritage or legacy systems, which, when you overlay AI technologies on top of them, it's only one part of the jigsaw. So how do you then make the best use of your systems? Because you still have to interface with those systems. So if you think of it as a picture, as a maybe a jigsaw, it's maybe a new piece in that jigsaw, or it's a new color you can use, but all the rest of that jigsaw remains. So you do have to consider that. Like, it would have been like any other technology, like or a movement or a change in technologies, like say SOA, for example, service-oriented architecture, the microservices world, which has been, a key operating or a solution architecture model or an enterprise architecture model for the last few years. AI is another layer, but you still have to consider the impact on your heritage or legacy systems, because those insights that you gain, you're probably going to use those insights to then attack your legacy technology, because if you've built up technical debt, you still kind of have to get rid of it. AI is a new tool, but it doesn't solve your heritage technical debt problems. And you have to build on those systems. And that is actually a challenge, because it's a new shiny tool in the toolbox. But by the way, you still have to use the rusty saw and the dodgy clippers or whatever you're using to get other work done. So it's an interesting dynamic. So you have to have, like, I suppose the old engineering world still exists, which is you're building interfaces to systems. Those systems transfer files or deliver reports. You're still working with those systems.
I wonder sometimes when we talk to clients about these new technologies, so much of the work we do with them is based on digitization and microservices and cloud migration, assisting in an economical way of modernizing their ability to use data and to distribute data to both internal and external users. And we look at ways to use some of these newer technologies, AI in particular, in an efficient, productive, predictable way, as opposed to just looking at AI as an overall solution. To your point, how do you find the professional industry in technology dealing with that problem? Do you segregate AI functionality from the core, from the legacy systems, or do you try to integrate them?
If you think about AI as a service, in other words, you're using a large language model within your ecosystem. It's just a service that you use. So let's say you're passing data to it, you're asking it questions, you're asking it to interpret the text that you're sending it, you're asking it to extract information from it. It could be data points, or doing sentiment analysis. It's really just another service within your ecosystem. So it's not something that you're necessarily embedding into each system. So the design or the architecture that I have in mind is it's another service or set of services within your microservices architecture, and it's just you're using them for certain purposes. So it's not that AI finds its way like a virus into every system. You're actually encapsulating it correctly. You're using it correctly, and then it's just part of that jigsaw.
We think that some of the project design and architectural inputs that we provide are more and more focused on what you're suggesting, not just to integrate AI some way into the process, but to look at it as one of many pieces of, for example, microservices that we can use to enhance specific areas of functionality.
An interesting challenge that I have seen or we're seeing is that many vendors let's say you have an enterprise workflow system, or you have a policy administration system, or you have a documentation system. They said we have AI capability, right? So everything now, all vendors are selling AI capability, but as an organization, as a consumer of that, do you start using every variation of AI throughout all of those systems? And that becomes very difficult because there are different flavors, they're at different levels. AI is changing so quickly. So what you can't do is tie yourself into 10 variations of AI delivery. You're going to have to architect your solution, say, oh, we're going to take the best of and use that. And then, if you like, propagate that through our interfaces to other systems. So it's very hard to use every version of AI that every vendor is selling. You have to look at it and say, okay, I get it, but we're not using that system for its AI capability. We're using it as an enterprise workflow system. We're using AI separately as a service that allows us then to interface with that workflow system. So you kind of have to be careful because everyone is selling AI at the moment, and you kind of say, okay, how do we build a solution that uses AI, but we don't get swamped, we don't get over, it's a tsunami of AI. You kind of hang on a second. We just have to go. We have to have something that's delivered in Q1. We have to have something that's delivered in Q2. You have to manage it. So you can't. You have to be careful about your architecture, and you take the best of, and you say, right, that's the best we have. That's the best service we have for an LLM, for example, and we're using it.
Yeah, speaking of the AI, we know that the AI is dominant. However, that's as the service provider, IT service provider. There are two opinions to our business. One is that this is the challenge for the IT service provider because everybody now can use AI to program, right? And the efficiency is going up. There's no need for so many like IT services. But on the other side, that the people are saying that there are more and more requirements in terms of the AI, innovative AI applications or ideas and implementations. So in your view, Patrick, what's your view to the service provider, IT service provider? What's their opportunities and challenges to the firms, and also what's your view that we can improve our services using AI?
Yeah, you're right. So developers can use AI technologies to give them, to build software faster. That is the truth. You can ask an AI model, how would I develop this function? What would an architecture look like? So what you find is that you don't need as many developers per se or solution architects to deliver a concept, but you then have to be careful about the use of AI. So it's like the analogies have been made, like it's an enthusiastic graduate. It's very confident in its own ability, and you ask it, how confident are you in that answer? It says, oh yeah, I'm super confident. But the reality is it's not necessarily perfect. So you still need those SME resources to make sure that what has been used or designs that have been created are sound. You also have to test those, and you have to deliver those to the business. So I suppose from the point of view of software engineering, some parts of that have become slightly easier from a development point of view because it's easier to determine what's a good way to do this, and give me some examples. But you still have to deliver those small pieces, that piece of software always forms a part of a program delivery. And that from the design, from the analysis, from the requirements perspective, to delivering that through to a production system with IT support, etc. All of those things still need to happen. And what I've seen is that AI technologies has kind of reinvigorated companies to spend more because they can say, we can achieve more through spending on AI. But all of those AI projects, if you want to call them that, still exist. Going back to a previous question from Bob, is that those legacy technologies are still in play. You can't deliver AI solutions to large organizations without also addressing some of the technology challenges that exist. So if I was from a Heng Chen's perspective or from a vendor's perspective, understanding what AI can give you, but also being able to deliver more with those AI projects and addressing that technical debt that happens or that typically exists within those organizations. Because it's like the tip of the iceberg. There's a large part of the iceberg that's under the water. You know, AI is a little bit that's kind of above it at the moment, but all of those other things still exist. So being able to, like, let's say, smoke test an AI, the use of AI, you could do it in a few hours. You say, yeah, that looks like it might meet what we need to do. But the program takes 6 months, could take 9 months to actually deliver it into production. So it's the difference between a kind of a conceptual smoke test or a small piece of the solution. You still have to deliver large programs of work. In fact, because, you know, companies are spending more, they're actually looking at that technical debt as well. Or that's what I'm seeing is that, yeah, we have this new tool in the box, but we also have to address those other systems that have gone unaddressed for 10, 15 years maybe.
And the other one is that so I know that Patty, you have been working with various vendors globally. So what's your view or what's your perspective that's a great vendor from average one?
I mentioned it earlier on, and I think the word challenge is a good word, and I mean it from the positive challenge point of view. So making an ordinary idea into a better idea, making a good idea into a great idea, that's what I mean by challenge. So working with partners or vendors that can actually challenge the status quo or enhance a reasonable solution design into a great solution design.
That's right.
That's one part of it, but also working with a partner who's interested in a successful outcome. Now that sounds very simplistic, right? You know, all partners are interested in successful outcomes. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Partners behind the scenes, generally what they're interested in is revenue growth. In other words, getting, you know, it's like the body count. We need to get bodies on a project. And what you have to be able to do is be able to assess from the potential list of partners, well, which partners or vendors are trying to just get bodies in the door, and which ones are trying to help you solve your problems and have successful outcomes. And it's the ones who are equally invested in successful outcomes, they're the ones that you should partner with, as opposed to the ones who are saying, okay, I can get 10 people into this project now. I don't really care about the success of the project, but I've got 10 people that I'm charging out on a daily rate or an hourly rate. So you have to be careful about your selection process. And that's something that I've seen where partners are invested in successful outcomes, as opposed to being as opposed to having an objective of achieving revenue growth for themselves. That's the distinguishing factor. So if you can find people on the good side of that scale, then you're off to a good start. And the last point I would make is kind of a cultural fit. And you know, we know that in IT programs, we're working globally. You know, there's a kind of a generic business culture, which is just get the job done, right? But we know we're working with companies that have staff in the US, we've got teams working in Germany, we're in France, we have partners working in Eastern Europe or in China or in Asia or in India. That kind of cultural fit. So you have to have, everyone has to deliver to the organization, what the key stakeholders want, right? So that's basically IT delivery. But culturally, you have to be able to work with a partner as well, which is kind of like that respect of, well, let's say we're working with you in Hangzhou. We understand the Chinese culture. We understand the Irish culture. We understand an American culture. They're not all the same, but you can actually adapt. You can respect those cultures and say, look, this is how we work. This is how you work. This is how we can work together. So it's that kind of, there's an element of culture to that as well. And it sounds like it's a simple thing, but it's not entirely simple, you know. And with some companies I've worked with for short periods of time, I would say, for these companies, that culture didn't work. You know, that there was a difference in the culture, and there wasn't the ability to actually make it work between two different business cultures. And when that doesn't work, it tends to fall away, you know, and those relationships tend to end after a short period of time. There's been a kind of a common theme to what I've spoken about, which is you know, things like trust and openness and collaboration. Now you also have to have all those other good things which every company will desire to have, which is good process, collaboration tools, information security policies, all those things. I'm accepting that those things exist. So they are just the hygiene factors, or you must have these things for any program or project to work. I'm talking about this, I suppose, what I would have seen as the ingredient that makes all of those things work. And those ingredients are the trust, collaboration, the openness, those things. They're the things that you layer in. And without those, it doesn't matter how good your process is, or whether you have all of the Atlassian collaboration tools, or you have, you know, fantastic infrastructure delivery. You know, projects won't be successful without those other aspects that I talked about. So I suppose if people were to think that, oh, well, all you need is trust, well, that's not the case. You need other things as well, but trust and that openness and that collaboration have to be threads through everything that allows, you know, long-term relationships to be established, and ones you can go back to again and again over time. So, you know, I know I can go back to, if it's Wells or Jen or another partner, and say, okay, we worked with them, you know, a few years ago, we can work again, because we had that way of working, that culture of working was well established, and a good working relationship.
Well, I would say, perhaps in conclusion, that as I said earlier, we as a company and as a group of individuals working on projects with you have learned from you in terms of blending cultures, how to collaborate, and how to combine our respective skills, both with you and your internal teams, as well as with other vendors that you've engaged. And in the process, I think we've become a better company. So we have appreciated that relationship, and that's a big reason why we wanted to ask you to join us today to talk about some of these issues, because we think that this learning is something that we can share with the broader technology and user community. So we very much appreciate, Paddy, you're taking the time to talk with us today.
No, I've enjoyed it, Bob.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Wells. You know, it's been nice to talk about these things, you know.
We thank you for joining us, and we hope that you've enjoyed and benefited from this conversation with Paddy Keating. We've learned a lot from all of our clients over the years, and Paddy is just an example of some of those learnings we thought might be of interest to you. If you have needs in the areas of technology, particularly development or project management, we hope that you'll remember us and give us a call. But in the meantime, we wish all of you well, and thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Founded in 2004 as an alliance of State Street, Zhejiang University, and Insigma, Hingtian began as a research center at Zhejiang University, a top-ranked technology university in China's Silicon Valley. From a small team to over 2,500 professionals serving more than 600 global clients. As we expand globally, we embrace a new identity, one that reflects our vision for the future. Introducing Horizon 8, your trusted partner for technology innovation. We help industry leaders navigate complexity and provide value-driven solutions beyond just code. Horizon 8. New Horizon. Global Future.